Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi. I'm really happy about today because I've wanted to have this gentleman on for a long time. He's the son of an iconic Yankee. He's also been a sports agent for over 20 years. He was even a manager in the minor league system. It is my honor to introduce to you Mr. Billy Martin Jr. And Billy, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor.
Glad to be here. It's hey, we get baseball, no COVID stoppages today, so it's a good day.
Right. So Billy, I was thinking about it. You were probably 5 or 6 years old when your father got the job as the manager of the Minnesota Twins. So if you do the math, the first 13 years of your life, you probably moved around a little bit between Minnesota, Detroit, Texas, the Yankees. So just talk about growing up being the son of a father who was a major league athlete.
Well, I liken it to being an army brat, kind of, because you're every few years you're packing up and moving. And he was a scout for the Twins when I was born, and then started coaching, and they asked him to manage their AAA team, which was in Denver. So we moved to Denver, 1968. I guess that was the team he managed that had Charlie Manuel on that team. Greg Nettles was on that team, and his pitching coach from then on was the pitching coach / closer, Art Fowler. And the next year he got the Twins job, and we moved back to Minnesota. And a couple of years later we moved to Detroit. A couple of years later we moved to Texas. His next job was New York, and so we'd spend summers in the city and come back to Texas for winter.
Right. And Billy, you were a pretty good athlete yourself as a kid. I believe you played soccer and baseball in college. So just talk about as a kid playing sports. I mean, obviously you liked baseball, but were there other sports you enjoyed as well?
Oh, absolutely. I loved football, even though I didn't have the right body for it. But football, soccer, and baseball were my three favorites. Played a little basketball too. I wasn't as good as my father at basketball, but the other sports were fun for me in a way because I wasn't Billy Martin Jr. in those sports, if you know what I mean.
Right.
I'll never forget, I went to one of Mickey Mantle Jr.'s baseball games when he was in high school, and he was a great player. But I remember hearing these two older men a couple rows behind us saying, "He ain't no damn Mickey Mantle." And, it resonated with me that, wow, are people looking at me, comparing me to my father? And first of all, how many big leaguers can you compare to Mickey Mantle, let alone a high school kid? And so that's part of why I love soccer. It's just, I didn't have that added pressure on me.
Right. And speaking of Mickey, your father and Mickey had a close friendship. So let me ask you, as a kid, you knew who Mickey Mantle was. He was obviously one of the greatest baseball players of all time. But I mean, because he was friends with your father, did you look at him more as your father's friend than you did Mickey Mantle, the baseball player?
Sure. Especially as a youngster, people don't realize it. They always say, "Oh man, you're so lucky your dad's the manager of the Yankees." And when you're a kid, you don't realize it. I literally answered that question at times with, "Well, I wish my dad worked at General Motors with your dad because you get to see your dad every night." I only get to see mine on TV. But as I got older, I realized, and the moment I realized, I was in Fenway. I was traveling with Dad. I'd spend a couple weeks traveling with the team, usually every summer, and I had Thurman Munson's mitt on. I'm shagging balls in left field, and somebody hit one off the monster, and it made that iconic thunk that only the monster sounds like, and it hit me. Wow. Babe Ruth used to run around this outfield, and the DiMaggio brothers, and Ted Williams, and I got the butterflies, and the next fly ball I got, and I was a little shaky, tried to catch it, and that's when I really realized how lucky I was to be his son and to experience all the stuff I got to do.
And Billy, sometimes your father gets more associated with managing, but he was a very good baseball player in his own right. And at one time, I think he had the World Series record for most hits in a World Series. I think he had a great 53 World Series. I mean, he was a very underrated player as well.
Well, he was really clutch. You know, his little joke tagline was "My 1 for 4 will kill you," and because he had that ability to get that big hit in the big moment, to make that big play. His everyday statistics, he was a 240.
Yeah. I think I lost you for a second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I lost you for a second, Billy. Well, we'll see if Billy could get back on. We lost him for a second here. I don't know what exactly happened, but his screen went out on us. So we'll see if he pops back on. But he was talking about his father being really clutch, and
he was a 3.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Billy. It kind of froze. You froze on me a little bit. We'll see if it gets back up.
There we are.
Yeah, it froze a little bit, but that's okay. So you were talking about him really being a clutch player.
Yeah, if there were if there was a Hall of Fame for World Series players, my father might have been the starting second baseman on that all-time World Series team. You know, you talked about the 53 World Series. Mickey Mantle told me this. My father never did, but Dad got screwed out of a hit in the 53 World Series.
Yeah.
He hit a ball on the left side of second base, on the Pee Wee Reese side of second base, that Pee Wee didn't get to, but Jackie Robinson, who probably had more range than any second baseman in the game, really ranged all the way into left field and dove for that baseball. Mickey said he totally laid out, and it just hit off the end of his glove. He said he didn't even totally get there. But he said, hell, even if he'd caught it, there was no way he could have jumped up, righted himself, and thrown your father out. He said he couldn't have thrown out Yogi, let alone your dad, who ran pretty good, because he was so far in left field. And the official scorer gave it an error. And Mickey said they didn't know why. Maybe he was a racist and wanted to give Jackie an error.
Yeah, you broke up on me again. See if Billy could get back up, but we'll see if this can resolve itself. But we lost Billy again. That's the thing, folks, with technology. It's the only negative is that you just don't know if your computer and your stuff is going to cooperate. But that's Billy Martin Jr., of course. And I really wanted to have him on because you heard so many stories about his father as a player or manager, and it always fascinated me. So I really wanted to have him on. So we'll see if he gets back up. But right now, we're just experiencing difficulties with him, and hopefully we could resolve this. Yeah, and we lost him, but when he gets back up, we'll plug him back up, and we'll see if this will work. But right now, again, the biggest thing, and it drives me crazy too, because I struggle with it, is when your Wi-Fi doesn't work good or your reception isn't great. And that's the thing, wherever you could be sometimes, the reception doesn't always want to cooperate. They've done so many great things with technology, but the Wi-Fi still seems to always be an issue for whatever reason. And hopefully in the next 5 years, they will work that out and the Wi-Fi will be better. But there are times when you're going to run into these problems. But just a little background on Billy, and I think we got him back up. And hey, Billy,
I just switched.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see you a lot better, and I could hear you a lot better. So you were talking about how they didn't give your father a hit; they gave him an error. So just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Dad hit the ball on the shortstop side of the base, and the great Jackie Robinson dove basically in the left field, completely laid out, just touched the ball with the end of his glove. It was clearly a hit. Mickey told me that everybody in the building knew it was a hit, and the official scorer credited it an error. And they assumed he was a racist and wanted to give Jackie an error. And it's, I put a post out on social media this year saying, here's proof that racism hurts everybody. And it cost my father what would have been 13 hits in a 5-game series.
Yeah.
Which would have been an all-time record. He's tied with 2 other guys for 12 hits.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's unfortunate of that. And Billy, the other thing too, you talk about a father-son type relationship. He had that relationship with Casey Stengel. I think if somebody had to ask Casey Stengel who he cherished as like a son, Billy was that guy. So just talk about their relationship a little bit.
My father's real father left his mother when he was about 6 months old. And Casey really was like a father to him. He played for the 48 Oakland Oaks that Casey managed.
Yeah.
And Casey really took him under his wing, and of course got the Yankee job the next year. Casey did, and then won the World Series. So he said, "Hey, now that I got a little pop, I want you to sign that little Dago I had playing for me in the Pacific Coast League." And at the time, it wasn't even as much for Dad's talent as it was his grit, his ability to see the game, and Mickey used to tell me stories about this. Dad would notice something and run over to Casey and say, "Hey, look where the shortstop's playing. We can steal second. They won't even make a throw." Or he'd notice a pitcher tipping his curveball with something he did with his glove. Mickey said, "I knew your dad was going to be a great coach back when we were players, because he was always looking for and finding little advantages on the field."
Right. And Billy, the thing about you that's really cool is, obviously you said it before, that a lot of times you were looked at as Billy Martin's son, and that's why you enjoyed the other sports more. But to play college baseball, college soccer, you have to be a great athlete. So you had to have had a pretty good career in high school in both sports. So just talk about that a little bit in high school.
Yeah, I mean, I could play. I had a lot of heart. I was probably similar to Dad. I was clutch. Guy I played baseball for was kind of hard to play for. He screamed and yelled at me a lot. He yelled at me the way you saw my father yell at umpires. I think he thought that's what my dad would have wanted. And I was afraid to tell my father, because I thought Dad would beat him up, and Mr. Steinbrenner would fire him again, and it'd be my fault. So I never told him, but my father only got to come to one of my high school games.
Right.
He was actually managing Oakland, and they were playing the Rangers. So he was late to his own game to come see me. And I was 5 for 5 that day, because I knew my coach wouldn't have the to yell at me.
Yeah.
And so I went out there and had fun. And Dad thought I was great. He had the Yankees offer me a contract.
Okay.
I knew I didn't deserve it. But but there's always that little bit of doubt. What if? Could I have been a utility infielder? Could I have played with that same confidence I played with when my father came to watch me play, if I'd have done that? But we'll never know.
Right, but that's pretty awesome too, though. Even though he only got to attend one game, you go 5 for 5. So, I mean, you always have that memory, and I bet you probably remember that game more than you remember the 60 games you played in high school.
Absolutely. I mean, first pitch I saw, I came about that close to have what would have been my only home run in high school.
Yeah,
hit fence in left field, and yeah, I remember it. It was great. And the funny part was the catcher on the other team I'd gotten into a fight with in our school parking lot a few weeks before. And a bunch of my football player buddies were sitting with my father and a reporter, the great Randy Galloway here in the Metroplex, and they're telling my dad, "Hey, Mr. Martin, Billy beat that guy up over in the parking lot over there." He was more excited about that because this guy was about 6'3" and, you know, a linebacker, and he was more excited about the fact that I beat that guy up than the fact that I was 5 for 5 that day.
So talk about this, Billy. Him coming to the Twins, and right away he made them a respectable franchise because they really hadn't really found their niche in Minnesota. And his first year, attendance went up. The team won the division. I mean, just talk about that first year. I think it was his only year too, managing for the Twins, and what a job he did in that one year. I think they won 91 games.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that was a fun team. And so many great players on that team. You know, Tony Oliva just got in the Hall of Fame. Harmon Killebrew. You know, I was just a kid, but loved it there. Loved that atmosphere. But, you know, Dad was going to do it his way, and he ended up having some arguments with management, and we ended up moving to Detroit. So
yeah, and then look at what he does in Detroit. He turns them around. They win the division. They make the playoffs. I mean, that's the thing about Billy, or your father, I should say, is every team he managed, he made them a better team. And most of the time he got them to the playoffs. Obviously, he won the championship with the Yankees. But I look at one player in particular, Billy, that is all you need to know about your father is Rickey Henderson. Rickey Henderson, a Hall of Fame player, a great player. But Rickey couldn't just play for any manager. It took a special manager to really get him to play. And he always gave your father his very best each time he was out there. And you could tell he loved Billy like Casey loved Billy.
yeah, you're right. I remember one day the trainer was going over the whole list of players with Dad, and this was in Yankee in his office. And so, you know, don't pitch this guy. This guy only in emergency. This guy's quad's a little dinged up. We got to Rickey Henderson. He said, Skip, I don't think you should play him. This was Gene Monahan's talking. I don't think you should play him. We've got an off day tomorrow. We can get this hamstring right. We'll have 2 days to heal him up. But he really wants to play. So Dad gets up and walks in the training room. And there's Rickey laying on his stomach, you know, getting treatment. Dad puts his hand on his back. Hey, pal, you know, Gino says I should rest you today. No way, Skip. I'm your guy. I'm your guy. He goes, you're damn right you're my guy, and I need you all year, and we need to get this hamstring right. I'm your guy, Skip. Just let me cruise. Let me cruise. You know, meaning don't expect me to run everything out. And Dad said, all right, pal, but I'm counting on you. You know, take care of yourself out there.
Right.
We walked out of there, and I said, Dad, that was cool. I'd never seen him show love like that to a player before. And he said, Pard, they're all different. Some of them hate me, and some of them love me.
Yeah.
And I don't care. I just need to know. I don't like the damn fence riders, the ones I can't tell where they stand. If they hate me, I can push their buttons. If they love me, I can push their buttons. And some of them need love, like he just showed me. Some of them need a kick in the ass.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think we lost you again, Billy. We'll see if we could get that situated. Looks like the Wi-Fi went out again, but as soon as we get Billy back, we'll continue that conversation. But I remember, folks, Ricky Henderson. He couldn't always play for just anybody. Like I said, I mean, it took a special manager to get him to play. And Ricky Henderson really gave an effort when he played for Billy Martin. I mean, he loved Billy. He idolized Billy. And, I mean, he run through a wall for Billy. He really would. And, okay, I think we got you back. So you were talking about some players needed him to push their buttons, and some players obviously didn't. But that's the special type of manager he was, Billy.
Yeah, not many people like give him credit for being the psychologist he really was. You know, because that was his job. Like I know Al Kaline, I think voted against him getting in the Hall of Fame because he said he wasn't fun to play for. And that Detroit team he managed was the oldest team in baseball. And Al was one of those older guys. And so Dad rested him some days. Not because he didn't want his bat in the lineup. Who wouldn't want Al Kaline's bat in the lineup?
Yeah.
He wanted to keep him healthy all year. And, you know, when the playoffs came, Al was in there every day. And, you know, he said to the committee he wasn't fun to play for. And, you know, I think if he would have ever looked back retrospectively and said, wow, Billy did his job. He got the best out of me. And that was his job. And so many players don't realize that.
And that's one thing that's wrong with the Hall of Fame, Billy, is that an example right there, because you have guys voting and sometimes they make it personal. And that's why I have a big problem with how people get votes, because your dad shouldn't get penalized. If he's a Hall of Famer, he should be in based on what he did on the field, not because he wasn't fun to play for.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you can break it down so many ways. There's so many guys in the Hall of Fame that probably really don't belong, or not for one reason. Maybe they do for two reasons. Maybe because they're a great announcer and a great player. Or, you know, I mean, you could say that about my father. He was a great World Series player.
Yeah.
But he belongs as a manager. His winning percentage is better than 10 of the managers in the Hall of Fame right now.
Right.
He's one of only 3 managers to take 4 teams to the postseason.
Yeah.
The other 2 are Tony La Russa, who's already in, and the great Dusty Baker, who's a shoe-in to go in, who's already won 2,000 games. And Dusty's taken 5 teams to the postseason.
Yeah.
But Dad belongs. Ask Tony La Russa who was the best manager he ever managed against. And he said, and I quote, "I don't even belong in the same sentence with him." You know, and that's the great Tony La Russa, Hall of Famer, who's, you know, doing it now. I love that you see him and Buck Showalter and Dusty kicking butt in today's world of analytics, because the manager does matter and does make a difference. And, you know, you can't just do this by analytics.
Right. So this is always a interesting topic I always wanted to talk about. It's always fascinated me, is Billy and George, because let me tell you right now, I mean, yes, he got fired 5 or 6 times by George, but I could tell you right now that George also loved him like a brother, son, friend, whatever you want to call it, because George would fire him, and then 2 weeks later he'd want to hire him back.
It was the epitome of the true love-hate relationship, because they grew up in completely different sides of the train tracks, right? My father was dirt poor. You know, George's father owned the American Shipbuilding Company, not the American Shipbuilding Company. But they were both loyal as the day is long. They both could not handle losing, only wanted to win, and would work their ever-living tails off to make that happen. And, you know, my father, people don't know, my father had a lifetime contract with Mr. Steinbrenner. And, you know, Hank Steinbrenner and I have become good friends over the years. And he used to always tell me, I would have just let your dad alone and let him manage, let him be who he was. I didn't care if he got in a bar fight every now and then, you know. And people always say that to me, oh, you should hate Mr. Steinbrenner. He fired your dad 5 times. I'm like, well, he hired him the exact same amount. And my father couldn't hate him, you know, because of his loyalty, and he was a unique man. And look, you don't get to be where George Steinbrenner was by sitting on your hands, you know. You look at the owners in professional sports like that, the Jerry Joneses and the Mark Cubans, and people complain about them all the time, but isn't that the owner you really want? The guy that cares that much, that puts that much of an effort into it? You know, it's funny, we joke about how much Mr. Steinbrenner meddled in baseball, that he tried to buy an NFL franchise for a long time before he bought the Yankees. People don't know his story. He coached high school and college football.
In the Big Ten.
Northwestern and Purdue. I mean, he was a college football coach when his father got sick, and George had to go take over the American Shipbuilding Company and right the ship, pun intended.
Yeah.
And he took it to such new heights because he was so damn smart that all of a sudden he had all this extra capital, and that's when he started looking to buy an NFL franchise. Well, this was the early 70s. Nobody was selling. The NFL was just starting to blow up, and he stumbled across the Yankees being for sale. People think he meddled in baseball. Think what he'd have done in football. I mean, he'd have made Jerry Jones look like an absentee owner.
Oh, yeah. And Billy, for a kid, you were probably 12 years old when Chris Chambliss hit that big home run. I mean, just talk about that, because your father's the manager of the Yankees. It's their first pennant in, I believe, 12 years as well. So the last time they won one was when you were born, and then they finally get over that hump and win the pennant. And what a night. I mean, as a 12-year-old kid, that had to be some sight to see all those fans on that field like that.
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, one of the clubhouse guys, I'm pretty sure it was Ray DeGrom, you know, grabbed me like, let's go in the clubhouse, because there's people running all over the field, and I'm watching cops with billy clubs run around and just whack guys on the head. And I mean, that was as entertaining as the game was almost. And I didn't want to leave that, but no, it's hard to describe that feeling, because during the games, you know, when you're watching a playoff game, football, basketball, any sport, and they show the family of, have you ever noticed they all look like they're biting their fingernails and they're terrified? Yeah. Well, you are, because there's nothing you can do. And you know how much it means to your dad. And, you know, it feels like every other hitter for the other team's going to hit a home run. It's terrible. So when that moment finally happened and Chris hit that big home run, I mean, it was just, it was the best feeling ever. And, you know, I was lucky enough to get to go down in the dugout and clubhouse and enjoy that with the guys.
And I believe your father gave you that American League championship ring, didn't he? I mean, he wanted you to have that, so you still have that, correct?
Yes, I got that about a year and a half later when they won the World Series in '77, and the home opener in '78 was the ring ceremony. Thank goodness I was there, or one of the clubbies might have gotten that ring, because Dad pulled it off his finger and said, "Here you go, Pard. You can have the second place ring. As today I'll be donning the first place ring."
And let me ask you, Billy, I mean, this has always been something that's been brought up for, we're going on 40 years now. I mean, it's no surprise, or I should say, you don't have to be a mind reader to know that him and Reggie had a complicated relationship, Reggie Jackson and your father. But with that said, if you watch Game 6 of the World Series and you see Reggie hitting those 3 home runs, who's the first guy congratulating him when he's coming to the dugout, giving him a hug? It's your father. And I went back and watched some of those World Series games recently, and you look at when the Yankees won Game 4, you see Billy give your dad, or Billy give Reggie a kiss after the game. So I think sometimes that the media tried to make them at war more than they really were, because on the field for that season, when all was said and done, they knew how to work as a team.
Yeah, well, you remember earlier I talked about pushing guys' buttons.
Yeah.
And Dad felt like he had to do things to push Reggie's buttons, and not only Reggie, but to keep the team together. You know, if you remember when Reggie signed that big deal and came to the Yankees, the first thing he did was take a shot at Thurman Munson.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
There's a new straw that stirs the drink now, was his comment in regards to what's it like playing with team captain Thurman Munson. And he took that shot. And so the team didn't like him. So my father, trying to hold the team together, would do things to push Reggie's buttons and the team's. He'd bat Reggie in the 6 hole. He knew Reggie should be in the 3 or 4 hole. Come on, he was freaking Hall of Fame Reggie Jackson. But he did that to keep the rest of the team together, because they were mad. They didn't like those things he said. And I wish Reggie'd look back at it all and realize Dad really did love and respect him. He so respected Reggie's ability to step up in the big games, because that was who my father was as a player. You know, he played way better in the big games. And I think if Reggie could let some of that stuff go, but I get it. When it's happening to you and you feel bad, you feel like you're being ostracized, I really do get it. But what he didn't realize is Dad really respected him a lot. He just felt like he had to do that, because I sat in his office when other players would come in there and say things about it.
Yeah.
And they'd watch him when Dad would put up a lineup that had Reggie batting 6th. And you'd see Reggie throw up his hands and get mad and walk away. And all the other players would giggle and point at it. And they got a kick out of it. You know, it's a weird part of the game that
Let me ask you though, Billy, if your father were alive today, do you think him and Reggie would have eventually put their differences aside and had a good relationship? Because I feel like that somebody would have brokered a meeting with the two to kind of set up, put aside their differences. And I believe probably in 2022, I'll even go as far as to say 2002, they would have been okay with each other if your father had lived.
Oh, no doubt. And you know who the broker would have been? It would have been me or Ray Negron. Ray Negron was the fat boy who was close to my father, Mr. Steinbrenner, and Reggie. And Reggie was really good to me as a kid too. He gave me Reggie bars all the time.
Yeah.
Asked me to play catch with him, and which Dad noticed and thought was cool. He even said it to me one time. Reggie's good to you, right? And I said, yes, sir. He said, good. I like that. I just, sadly, I don't think Reggie thought my father was smart enough to try to find ways to push his buttons. And
yeah. But look at the result. I mean, Reggie's always remembered. I mean, he's a great player, but he's always remembered for that game 6 with the 3 home runs on 3 pitches. And who was his manager? It was Billy Martin. So, I mean, it all comes full circle when you look back at it.
Oh yeah, it does. And come on, look at Reggie's numbers the years he played for my father.
Yeah.
They were pretty good.
Yeah, they definitely were. And let me ask you this. Forget about Billy Martin, the manager, the baseball player. I mean, everything I've heard is he was a tremendous father to you. Like anything he might have done on the field with umpires, stuff like that, he never really ever raised his voice at you too much. So just talk about Billy Martin, the father, a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know that he ever yelled at me my whole life. I mean, look, I was going to do what he said anyways. I loved him so much. I respected him so much. He didn't have to yell at me. He could just talk to me, but he knew he couldn't always be there. You know, baseball's tough, and this was pre-cell phone days, you know? So it was a different world, but man, I knew he loved me. I knew he always wanted me to be with him. You know, he was the kind of dad that the only thing bums me out so bad is my kids never got to spend a day with him, you know, and didn't understand the unconditional love that man had for his people and how big his heart was. Everybody knows him as the fighter and the you know, the gamer, the winner, the wild man. His heart was what drove him. It was bigger than his grit and his anything. And people don't realize that the way he yelled at umpires as soon as the game was over, he was the first one to buy him a drink.
Yeah.
Sit down with him like nothing happened, you know. But the next day, you blow a call, he's going to be right in your grill again.
Yeah.
And as soon as the game's over, hey, let's have another beer. How you doing? You know, he was a different man between the lines, and he knew how to compartmentalize that. And when he left the lines, here he was.
Yeah, he definitely, I mean, tremendous manager. And one thing that I really loved about him was no matter how many times the Yankees did fire him, you would see him in the broadcast booth the next year, or say he got fired in June, you'd see him in the broadcast booth in July. You'd see him at Old Timers Day right away. It really was true when he said, I may not have been the greatest Yankee to wear a uniform, but I was definitely the proudest. I mean, you could really see the pride he had for those pinstripes.
What's funny about that, too, you know, people ask about that. Why did he love being a Yankee so much? I mean, you know, I couldn't have been happier for him as a manager when he was in Oakland. That was the best for me because the slogan of the team was Billy Ball. You know, those were the billboards all around the area. And he was so relaxed there. He didn't have the New York media to deal with. He didn't have George to deal with, you know. The fans even were just behind him, not throwing batteries if they lost the game. It was a different world. But he was never happy unless he was in pinstripes. And it really just goes back to his playing days. I mean, think about it. He breaks into the big leagues late in 1950. World Series championship. 51. World Series championship. 52. Game-winning catch of the World Series championship. 53. MVP of World Series championship. That's his first 4 years in the big leagues.
Yeah.
Then he goes to the Korean War, he gets drafted. The Yankees don't go. He comes back late 55. They go. They lose to Brooklyn. He wouldn't even get a ring that year. He opted for the belt buckle because he didn't want a second place ring. You know, he already had 4 first place rings. And then they win it again in 56. You know, so those are his first year. Duh. Why wouldn't he want to be in pinstripes when all you do is win the World Series every year?
Yeah, exactly. And let's talk a little bit, Billy, about you've had a tremendous career as well. And I believe 1995, you and a gentleman by the name of Dave Pepe started an agency called Integrity. First off, that's a great name for that. Talk about how you came up with that name. And number 2, talk about what it is to be a sports agent, because I know that probably can't be easy. You there? Yeah.
I often get asked to speak at colleges to their sports law classes or, you know, sports management classes, and because half the kids in that class want to be a sports agent, and my message is, don't do it. It's a tough business model. It really is, because your world is dependent upon other people's production, and you know, it's the competition is insane. There are more agents now than there are players. So, but no, the name of our group's Pro Agents. I have a booking agency called Integrity Booking. We book musical talent.
Oh, okay.
And that's a different company. We started that during COVID because so many booking agencies shut down because there were so few places to be able to have concerts. And but Dave Pepe, my partner, Bill Pepe's son, is a man of integrity, and I'm proud to call him my partner because I wouldn't be able to do this without him. I wouldn't want to. He's an attorney. He's like my brother. You know, I bought my first record album with him when I was 11 or 12 years old, and he's been my friend that long. So yeah, we're very different. You know, he's Jersey, I'm Texas. You know, we're
sometimes it works that way.
We argue like brothers.
And who are
it does. You know, it helps you get to the truth.
And who are some of the people, Billy, that you've represented over the years? Because I mean, you've represented some pretty famous people as well. You there? I think I lost you again. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah. Well, the best client we ever represented was Joe Nathan. You know, Joe was special, and he was that guy that you feel like you're lucky to be involved with, just because not only was he such a great player, but a great human being. And you know, there have been times in my career when my phone would ring and I'd look down and go, oh no, this is not going to be fun. Not when Joe Nathan called. You know, he was someone you always wanted to talk to, that you were so proud to be involved with. And, you know, we've had lots of players over the years, but Joe was definitely the best. And as a human being, it's hard to imagine.
Yeah, because I know it can't be easy, because again, you're in the business of getting them work. I mean, that's really what you have to do. I mean, because once they retire, they lean on you to get them work as well. So I mean, again, it could be stressful sometimes, but I'm sure it could be rewarding at the same time as well.
Sure. You know, and look, we get in this for the long haul. You know, Dave and I don't disappear on our guys when they get released, things go bad. We try to help them find other jobs. And we've placed lots of players in jobs with other teams, colleges, whether it's coaching, broadcasting, marketing. We stay there for our guys. I'm not sure our competition does that.
Right. And Billy, let me ask you this. You, in 2017, you started taking a page out of your father's book, and you were managing in the independent minor league for a Texas team, correct? So talk about that.
Well, it was quite an educational experience for me. The great Donnie Nelson, who grew up a similar world that I did. His father was Don Nelson, one of the winningest coaches in NBA history. And Donnie ended up buying a team here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And Donnie's a lot bigger than I am. He made me manage the team. I didn't have much of a choice. But like he said, Billy, this will be really good for you as an agent. This will help you. And he was right. I was naive enough to really think I could show up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening and manage the games and, get on with my life. I lost a couple of great clients as an agent doing that adventure, but I learned so much. I learned how much I really didn't know about what went on. And it was a wonderful experience. I learned so many things that why you need guys in your foxhole that have your back, not that are looking to stick a knife in your back. Why one player's mind is so different than another's, and how to push those buttons. I mean, I really learned how great my father really was. As I was finishing in second to last place in the American Association, I had a much better understanding of the genius my father was in a baseball uniform.
Right. And Billy, let me ask you, before we go, 2-part question. One, what has been the most rewarding thing about your career and what you've done? And number 2, what would you want people to remember your father for the most?
Well, in regards to my career, it's the relationships. I still talk to players that I represented when we first started on a regular basis. I've had players call me and tell me you were like a father to me, Billy. You talked straighter to me than my father did, or things like that mean a lot to me. In regards to my father, I look forward to the day he's inducted into the Hall. Has there ever been a more famous manager in the history of the game? Has there ever been another manager where the team's PR slogan was his name, Billy Ball?
Yeah.
Has another manager been on the cover of Sports Illustrated 7 times like he has? Been on the cover of Time magazine, hosted Saturday Night Live, been mentioned in and in movies. He's been mentioned in movies. He was mentioned in American Gangster like 2 years ago. He's been gone 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
and another thing I thought of too, he was the first guest ring announcer for the annual WrestleMania. So, a lot of people forget that as well. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean,
he was out there.
Right there just shows you the impact he had, not only in the game, but in society as well. Well, Billy, I want to thank you for coming on because, again, it was really important to talk to you because I think sometimes people only look sometimes at athletes and what they do on the field, what they do on the court. And it's always interesting to see that they're just like you, me, and everybody else when they're off the field. They have families, and family comes first. And just by talking to you tells me that your dad was a pretty damn good father as well. And I really applaud you for what you're doing in your life. And I know he's smiling down at you and he's very happy. So congratulations on your career.
Well, thank you. Like I said, I wish my kids would have gotten to spend one day with him. But what I wouldn't give for 30 more minutes, because he was so much fun. He was so full of love, and what he would have done next, we'll never know.
Right. Well, Billy, thank you again for coming on. It was a real privilege for me. And I really do thank you for taking the time to give me a few minutes today. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you. Well, folks, there you have it. You just got to know Billy Martin Jr. this last hour. And one thing is definitely sure, that he had quite a relationship with his father. You could still see him talk affectionately about him. And that's really what it comes down to. Billy Martin was a phenomenal baseball manager. He was a very good player. But you look at Billy Martin, and what you really see is he was an even better family man and father. And if you don't realize that, just look at Billy Martin Jr., look at what he's doing today in his life. And it's pretty safe to say that Billy is upstairs smiling and very proud of his son. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.